Fall in the commodity markets. The one to explain that is always Jerry Gidel, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So Jerry, we were close to $17 a bushel for soybeans, but now we have a pretty different picture.
Oh, definitely both. Actually, corn, soybeans, wheat, any particular commodity you wanted to point to here. Even cotton had a huge setback from there. It seemed to be a combination of things as we greeted this week. The forecast from for North America here talked about things cooling off late in the week, where we're at now, and on into next week for a while. And that, interestingly enough, most of the weather models didn't really project a lot of moisture, but that didn't. That's part that really caught their attention. Then we, of course, have had this ongoing concerns about recession, people lightening up their commodity funds versus staying with their stock funds. We ended up, uh, and in general here, the markets were vulnerable. And so a lot of stops below the market had a lot of fun liquidation. Actually, turns up that we had like a 65 cent break here in the corn market this week from last Friday's close. And we only had 4 days of trading, so we really got after it. And we even bounced today. So again, it was pretty ugly yesterday, to say the least. Same thing on beans. We had like $1.40 setback here in the July. From that standpoint, we did bounce in that one too, back above $16, which is psychologically positive. And wheat, it really, this is harvest time, this type of thing. Can't say that I really heard a tremendous amount of good yields coming out of the combines moving through Kansas. People were respectful of the fact that things were improving from where they had real early, but in many cases, particularly the western third of the state out there, has still got some very ugly yields, and we ended up with $1.63 setback. So boy, all three of them took a real tumble this week in the corn price, or in the commodity prices here for the spot cash prices here in the U.S.
Yes, and the weather for the western Kansas, do you think that will bring higher wheat prices in the future?
Oh, I kind of feel like that when we finally get some updates on that, and now we will not get a USDA winter wheat production number on these June 30th updates. That will come on the July 10th or number that will be issued there on production. We will, though, get an update on spring wheat plantings, durum plantings, overall plantings, and wheat. And that many times we never have too many changes in the winter wheat numbers. We've had two or three, a couple, three estimates already on that. So that usually has minor changes. It's really going to be what the impact of that wet weather was in, North Dakota, Montana, Minnesota. And will that reduce it? I think that generally speaking, the trade is kind of anticipating that on the wheat. And then, interestingly enough, despite the cooler weather here, there's lots of things popping up about in the eastern corn belt here about a flash drought, which in essence is it's slow. All of a sudden, we're popping up here with the last 6 weeks or so of minimal, or not as good a moisture as we should have. Actually, they had an update here in Chicago. We were an inch down in May, and we're at about half of what we normally have in June. Now this is the 25th or 24th of the month here, so it's not wildly behind. But there's no forecast even here locally. There's little showers maybe this weekend, but very hit and miss. And then they're talking about the best possibility is next Friday or Saturday. But I've seen even some forecasts here today that are questioning that situation. So weather is still going to be a big factor here on all these prices going forward.
Yes, and how is that impacting the planting programs?
The the prevent planting levels.
In the acreage, yes.
Oh, the expectations. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. My ears are a little dirty tonight. It turns up that we're going to get stock reports are important. We kind of went over those a little bit last week on corn and soybeans and that. And the only one that's particularly different than what I was anticipating was in the corn. There's a little more optimism there on the feed usage. And I don't have a disagreement with that. That's 4.34 versus my 441 number out there. But the big numbers are going to end up being the planning numbers. They always are. And that, and particularly after we ended up having a significant U.S. consultancy down in Memphis come up with their numbers with 1.5 million up in corn and 2 million decline in beans, and wheat was going to be lower too, and it really kind of put a lot of people confused about what we anticipated, because originally a lot of talk was anticipated that we are going to have a lower corn number because of all the problems up in the northern plains. But I think they're right in the fact that some of the other areas of the country were probably going to see some increases in their plantings. A lot of talk that maybe they call the I states, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, potentially could see 200,000 acres apiece. I kind of feel like Illinois will be a little more, a little less, than Indiana. Iowa, I think the 200,000 makes some sense. But interestingly enough, I think that the lateness of plantings, because officially the insurance levels on any of your U.S. government revenue insurance and things like that, May 25th is the last day that you get complete coverage on whatever value you might decide to go ahead and insure at. That ranges from 70% is basic to 75, 80, 85. And so all of a sudden, 10 days later, you're 10% down. And I think that really makes a difference on your insurance if you plant things later in the season, because of the fact that we have a bigger problem here or have a concern about yields from freeze temperatures and that in September and October, particularly in the northern part of the U.S. So I think that's a feature that ultimately I kind of come up with a number here of 140, 150,000 acres less. Now, that's not the lowest number out there in expectations, but it's a number that is more people anticipated a higher swing from other areas, and maybe they're right about maybe not having maybe 400, 500, 600,000 acres of prevent plant up in the northern parts of the northwest part of the Corn Belt and the northern plains at that point. The beans, once the shifting's going over there in those Midwestern states from to corn, that means less beans. And the trade expectations here is 90.45. That's down about 500,000 acres than what we had back in the March number. And I failed to point out the fact that the average guess here from Reuters was 89.86. That's up about 350,000 acres versus my 150,000 less. So, but in general here, the numbers here as we go forward on corn and soybeans traditionally are not huge changing factors here. We had some really ups and down numbers here since 2019. Beans that year, if you remember, that was a really, really wet year. And so producers really ultimately planted closer to their projections in March versus the June number, but they had a huge portion of the beans that they went ahead and put in prevent plant. And so we had a big decline on the June number on soybean plantings. And corn in 2020, now that's the first year there, excuse me, just a few months after COVID hit, we had some huge jumps, a huge jump, I should say, in the corn production ideas on acreage. We went up, I think it was up over 5 million acres, and up to clear up to 96 million that year. And that was a number that just didn't make sense to me because I didn't think the bankers were going to go ahead and finance something like that, which ultimately they didn't do. And also we had a little stability come back into the grain markets, and corn got a good support from some Chinese buying. So all of a sudden that 5 million addition got reduced back down by the time we got to June. Those are the two big years we've had some big swings on it. Other than that, we've had numbers that are reasonably modest changes versus the numbers that we get on the March 31st situation. The one thing that's going to be quite interesting is that some of the small grains and sorghum and cotton outside of the main U.S. growing areas there in the Midwest here, there's going to be some shifts on that. We had a pretty good jump expected in cotton, and we had very strong cotton prices. But I wonder if the drought situation in the Southwest might slice a little off of that. But I also think that that same situation could help boost the sorghum plantings in the Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas area, which is a very strong sorghum producing area. So it's a positive in the corn, but it's in the feed grain world, but it's not directly in the idea that corn plantings in Kansas are going to go up, because the time we got the recent rains here in very late May and early June, that's a little late to put that in. So I think that's one of the features that might happen here, is that those numbers are kind of bouncing around on things as we go forward here.
Yes, and how much do you think the supply chain issues are impacting the commodity markets? I heard some really crazy things about the border restrictions in China, and also that to take a container from California to Chile in South America, the railways take to the East Coast and then to the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, really? The West Coast is that messed up that it's easier to go to the East Coast, go through the Panama Canal, and then back down to San Diego. Wow. Well, I tell you, that's still an issue that's also haunting this market a little bit. Has been the issues of China and their, shutdowns, or I don't know, I guess lockdowns is the official term for that. With some of the COVID issues that popped up, and so Shanghai, a major city, we're talking about 20 million people, and that seems like it's constantly kind of going in and out of lockdowns. And I understand in the world of computers and internet and all that kind of stuff that that's people are still being productive in their houses and apartments and that. But the one thing that's not moving well in that environment is dock workers, and I've still heard things have calmed down somewhat over there, and they've got some of the grains that got stacked up in the March and April actually into the port, which now is somewhat a little burdensome. I heard some real problems with meal over there, which kind of added to our break this week. But the same situation is that the supply chain situation and China having more lockdowns doesn't make anybody feel good about commodity demand, because that's the demand that the U.S. gets out of China. We don't get a lot of we're not selling them too many semiconductors. We're selling them grain.
Yes, and affecting in the grain trade is also the stronger dollar.
Oh yeah, the dollar's strong. It's we're up over a par at a dollar for geez the last couple months. The one that kind of I guess snuck up on me was the ruble. All of a sudden, the ruble has got very strong. I think it has to do with the fact that they're about the only place to get wheat, and to some extent, their demand to get paid in rubles, which officially a lot of people are not paying them in rubles; they're still paying them in dollars. But I wonder if that isn't the case here. In general, there's been a lot of switching around and people having to buy more rubles to or get more rubles back on their energy situation and that. And I think that's going to be a surprise factor even for Russia. They've never had that issue of in the world of commodities, having a neutral to a weaker commodity currency value helps you in your sales. And there's some talk here that some of the people that thought they were going to be buying Russian wheat are wondering if they shouldn't be looking at other places. Even the U.S. might get a few of those orders, but right now, unfortunately, we're not very close to the Mid East.
Yes. And what about next week? What you are going to be watching?
Wow, yeah, it's hard to stick your old finger out above your head here to try to figure out where the wind's blowing at this point. But I kind of feel like that with the forecast that I'm starting to pick up and some of the early indications in that, I think we've maybe hit a short term